This morning, I took the time to look in Matthew chapter 2 at the wise men. I tried to draw some comparisons there with the wise men to us and how they are looking forward, and we should be looking forward, of course. But the wise men in Matthew chapter 2, God used them in this particular account early in Jesus' life in a very particular way. They were looking forward, and so God led them, directed them, gave them the information they needed, and they came. They saw the baby there in the home. They gave the gifts that they had brought. In contrast to them, but also similarly to them, are these shepherds. The shepherds were not planning, were not looking necessarily, were not expecting for sure. They were at work, right? They were doing their job. They're on the hillside. They're putting the work in that they're supposed to that time of year, watching their sheep, protecting their sheep. Many accounts and studies that I've done through this reveal that this particular time of the year was probably birthing time of year. And so there were, lambs giving birth, and so they were with their flocks. They were staying alert because of that. They were keeping away predators, and they were helping the mothers there that were bearing the little lambs, getting them ready, getting them, helping them with whatever they needed there at that time. And so these shepherds were working, right? They were at their work. They were doing their job. They were going about their regular duties of what they would normally do that time of year, that time of place, with the sheep as they normally had. Nothing was out of the ordinary for them. They were doing the same thing they always had. But that's who the angel came to. And I've focused on the angels a few times in some of my messages in the past. I would think that the angels, I've talked recently about the fact, I think Gabriel, I think I said last week, he has his hand on the doorknob, right? He's ready to go. I think they were ready to go with this announcement as well. I think they were excited about it. The angel came to proclaim the good news of the Messiah's birth. Heaven knew what was going on. Heaven knew the plan. And heaven was prepared and just excited about the news. There was apathy and darkness on earth, but the angels were excited about it. And once the angel made the proclamation there in verse 9, "Fear not, I bring you good tidings." Verse 12, "This shall be a sign. You shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger." And then suddenly, verse 13, the rest of the heavenly chorus joins in, right? There was a multitude of heavenly hosts praising God. And we have a record there of what they proclaimed as well. And so the one angel joined by a multitude of angels, and all of that announcement, all of that excitement, all of that proclamation was given to a handful of shepherds on a hillside, right? Not Jerusalem, not the news source of the day, or the politicians or the leaders. It wasn't given to the chief priest. It wasn't proclaimed at the temple. Right? All those things that we have seen so much leading up to. No, this proclamation, this excitement, this angel and the multitude of the heavenly hosts proclaimed the good news of Christ's birth to some shepherds. Not a high-standing profession, though an important one. There are those that said many of these sheep were probably sheep that were being prepared for sacrificial purposes in the temple not far away. And so these shepherds had an important job, but not a job of status or standing or high-paying job, or they were simple people. But as I thought about the shepherds, a couple of things came to mind. One, God knew that they were willing recipients of the news. In other words, they cared, and we know that because of what they did with the information they got. But isn't it interesting? The angel didn't tell them to go. The angel said, "Here's your sign," right? "This shall be a sign unto you," verse 12. "You will find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger." Listen, we know this. We know this from the story. How long do you think Mary Joseph, and Jesus stayed in the barn, right? Probably just that night, right? There were probably some other accommodations they went to or got to the next day, or, I understand she had just given birth. She may not be traveling the next day, but there were probably I doubt they stayed in the barn for too long. A day, two at the most, right? How long did they stay at the barn? I don't know, but the angel said, this is what you're going to find when you get there. Hint, 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 right? You should go. And so when the angels left, the shepherds said one to another, verse 15, the shepherds said one to another, right in the middle of the verse, let us now go even unto Bethlehem and see this thing which has come to pass, which the Lord hath made known unto us. There was you know what, I think we should go. And now. And so God knew that these shepherds that were on the hillside, I don't know what their spiritual condition was, but they didn't shy away from the good news. They did something with it. So I thought I'd do a real quick comparison between the wise men and the shepherds. These are two that came from very different backgrounds, obviously different nationalities, different countries, one relatively close in proximity, one group from far away. Two totally different type of backgrounds in their status, right? The one group traveled evidently from wealth and probably with some academic standing, while the second group, the shepherds, were shepherds. They were farmers. They were on the hillside. They didn't have a lot commercially or financially. But at the same time, here's the two groups that both received the news in different ways and then came. I was leaving, as you all were leaving this morning, going out. Brother Walker said to me, he's like, do you ever wonder why Herod or his wise men or one of his assistants didn't just go with the wise men to find Jesus, Why don't we just go with you? Why? Because they didn't care, right? They didn't really put any seriousness to it. It wasn't important to them. They didn't think it was that significant. Herod only looked at it as maybe a potential threat to his throne someday, right? With this king. And we know what happened, and now he, ended up putting a death sentence on the children born at that time in that area, to which Mary, Joseph, and Jesus had to flee into Egypt. But these wise men got the revelation from God. They studied Scripture, and God gave them a star to guide them. Guided them to the right city, and then eventually guided them extra to the right house. We saw that in Matthew chapter 2. They got the star, they were looking for it, and they went. Shepherds, not necessarily looking for it. We don't have any record of them expecting it. But as they're sitting there and they get the good news of Christ's birth, they look at each other and they're like, you know what we should do? We should leave all these sheep in the hands of Joe over there. Joe gets to stay, That's not in there, but it's expected, right? Somebody had to stay. And the rest of us are all going to get and go. We're going to go. We're going to go find out what's going on. We want to go see this. The angel came to tell them. So both of them were given a special revelation, special information, special direction. The shepherds was very specific, right? It's tonight, it's here, it's in a barn. You're going to know it's the right baby because he's lying in a manger wrapped in swaddling clothes. And so the shepherds are like, can't miss it, right? The wise men didn't have that specific. They had worked on this, as we saw, for a long period of time, looking forward, expecting, got the star, started to travel, got a second star, or a more specific location of that star as it came over the house where they were supposed to go. They both followed up on that. They both did something with that. Listen, God gave the information to those that were willing to do something with it, those that were going to act on it. I say that, and you and I know this. Everyone had access to Daniel chapter 9 back then, right? This was not a hidden book. They all had the excerpts from Micah, from Malachi, from Zechariah, from Isaiah, from all the different passages of Scripture that had pointed towards, with prophetic words, towards the Messiah coming, with some details of what to expect and how it might work and where it would be. It wasn't hidden. But the wise men were willing to do something with it. They traveled. The shepherds, when they got some information, they did something with it. Listen, I say that in contrast to Herod and his wise men. When they got some information, they did nothing with it. In fact, it was so apathetic, it was like, tell you what, when you find them, come back and tell us. And we didn't focus on that part of the story today in Matthew 2, but did they go back and tell Herod what they found? No. No, in fact, God told them not to. And they went another way. They left without stopping by to say hi to Herod and give him, they just left. So, a couple things. Both of these groups received that very special revelation. Both of these groups traveled in unity together. Both of them did. The wise men from a great distance, the shepherds from not so great a distance. Though the shepherds was very spontaneous and impromptu. It was now. We need to go now. We need to find someone to watch these sheep real quick because we're going tonight to find this which God told us about right now. They both, when they got it, they got together, they went. We see between these two groups, there's none too mighty or none too lowly. When they're introduced to the good news of Jesus Christ. We see that, I hope we understand, we see that today. There are none that the gospel is beneath. There's none that the gospel is too high for. The good news of Jesus Christ is for all. The wealthy, the affluent, the wise that come from far away, or the simple that are right next door. Both of these groups were very dedicated, though they had little information, right? Especially the wise men. They didn't have a lot to go on. God guided them as they went. The shepherds also, this was new information. They didn't know what all to expect. And let's face it, they didn't know what barn or stable to go to. Right? How many stables were there in Bethlehem? Probably a lot, right? Everybody would have had a stable of some sort behind their home or something at that time. What they say, I saw this the other day, just for comparison's sake. Well, 100 years ago, only the wealthy people had cars, but the common people had horses. Today, everybody has horses, and the wealthy people, everybody has cars. The wealthy people have horses, right? You got to be rich to have a horse. Used to be everybody had a horse. Used to be it was the only transportation or farm equipment that you had was a horse, a mule, a donkey, something like that. So this was commonplace, right? In Bethlehem, they all had a stable of some sort. They all had some type of transportation in the form of livestock. If they were farmers to some degree, they all had some type of livestock. And so a stable would have been common. So the shepherds probably didn't know which one to go to. They probably went to the one that looked like it had the most commotion, a light on. Something was happening. Maybe there was some buzz around it. As they're coming down through Bethlehem, probably somebody said, can't believe what happened in that barn over there. Shepherds were like, that's the place, you know. I don't know how they knew, but they started to go to Bethlehem, and they found the right stable. They acted on it. I mentioned this morning, but neither of these groups were looking for that political leader. They weren't looking for a deliverer from the Roman government, from the oppression that they were in. In fact, neither group was looking to get something from Jesus. That's in contrast to the rest of Jesus' life, especially his ministry, right? For all of Jesus' ministry, people were coming to Jesus to get something from Jesus. Can you help me? Can you heal me? Can you help my child? I've had this disease. People were coming to Jesus for something. There were a number of instances, and we like to look at those where Jesus went out of his way to find someone that maybe wasn't looking for him, like the woman at the well. She didn't know she was looking for him, but she was. So we have these. They weren't looking for a political leader. They weren't looking for that person to help them. The wise men knew that this was the Messiah. The shepherds heard the proclamation from the angels. They went to see what was going on. They were looking for the good news. God had revealed this to them. Both groups knew that. God had revealed this information to them. They needed to act on it. They needed to go. They needed to see. I wrote down, God reveals himself to those who are seeking and receptive. Right? He's not hidden. The people that are looking for God will find him. There are people out there who say, I don't see God. Well, you're not looking for him, right? Draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. He's not hard to find. And so we have these groups who were looking. The one for a while, the other one that night. They got the news, they started looking, they started searching, they started going for that and trying to find this one. Both of these groups went to him. I said that already. He didn't go to them. They came to him. Both of these groups worshiped him when they got there. We see verse 20. I'm still in Luke chapter 2. Verse 20. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things they had heard and seen as it was told them. How about verse 18? All they that heard it wondered at those things which were told them by the shepherds. Seems like the shepherds saw something that night that, number one, they couldn't stop talking about. They kept telling other people about what they had seen. The angels, the stable, Mary, Joseph, the baby, the Messiah had come. And we know that they just didn't find it interesting, right? It wasn't just that it was interesting. It wasn't just that it was unusual. It wasn't just that it was abnormal. It tells us in verse 20, which I read already, they returned glorifying and praising God for the things that they had heard and seen. They thanked God for which they had seen. It became a worship experience. It changed their perspective. I think it changed their lives. God gave them something special, and they couldn't stop thanking God for it. They were telling others about it, and they were thanking and praising God for allowing them to be eyewitnesses of what had transpired. That God entrusted them with the news. Again, why did God tell the shepherds? Well, I think God told the shepherds because of verse number 20. Well, verse 18, they told everybody else. And verse 20, they thanked and praised him for it. They didn't, I'm not trying to make light of this, but think of the problem of the human heart. They didn't set up a ticket booth outside the stable and say, hey, $5, you get to see a baby in a manger, you know? This could be a money-making thing. I wonder if we can get a book deal for this, you know? That's the American mindset on things, right? I wonder how I can profit off of this. The shepherds got the good news. They told everybody they could about it, but they thanked and praised God for including them in the story, for including them in this account, for giving them the good news. I think that's essential why God why God told them. It tells us here that they left glorifying, praising. They were rejoicing with what they had seen. They were excited. This was a night unlike any other. There was joy and excitement and happiness that they were part of all this. Go back to Matthew 2. We stayed right there. Matthew 2 we looked at this morning, but not in great detail. Matthew 2. Let's jump down. Well, I got time. We got some time here tonight. How about I read through this account, and I want to focus on the second half here tonight. Matthew 2, verse 1, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he that is born King of the Jews? We have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him." When Herod the king heard these things, he was troubled. No, stop right there. He wasn't excited, wasn't happy, wasn't praising and glorifying God. Far from it. He was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had gathered all the chief priests and the scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. They said unto him, "In Bethlehem of Judea. For thus it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not thou the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel." Then Herod, when he had privately called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. When did you first start seeing this? He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go, search diligently for the young child. When ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also." When they heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star, which they saw in the east, went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. Let's stop right there. And I want to pick up with verse 11. I want to emphasize that. But this star. So let me see. The beginning of Luke chapter 2, Joseph and Mary were traveling to Bethlehem because Caesar Augustus had declared a taxation and census, right? And so they were traveling back home, where they were supposed to go because of the record of taxation, right? That's why they were there. That's why they were looking. That's why they didn't have a place to stay. They didn't live in Bethlehem. This happened in Bethlehem. Now, you and I know this. So, the wise men see the star in the east. They travel. The scribes and chief priests tell them, I guess, and Herod specifically, the Bible says he'll be born in Bethlehem. So Herod sends them to Bethlehem. But most commentaries and stuff say it was very likely at this time Jesus was living in Jerusalem. He's going to flee to Egypt here in just a little bit. Right? They're going to have to, because Herod's going to be looking for him. But they're not necessarily living in Bethlehem. So the star comes to guide them. Herod said, "Well, according to my guys, go down to the little village of Bethlehem." And as they leave and start to head that way, the Bible tells us the star comes and rests over the house where they are. Where at? I don't know. What town? Don't know for sure. Are they in Nazareth at this point? Probably not. It looks like they settle in Nazareth after Egypt. So again, the star is leading them because Herod doesn't really know where they are. Herod's just saying, the best records we have is this was supposed to happen in Bethlehem. Yeah, but it happened in Bethlehem a while ago. To some accounts, maybe as much as almost a year ago now that this has happened. So the star comes and leads them to the house where they're going to go, wherever that is. I don't think we don't have a street address here, right? We don't know. Verse 11, when they were coming to the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. When they had opened their treasurers, they presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Being warned of God in a dream, I mentioned this earlier, that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. Notice verse 13. When they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared unto Joseph in a dream, saying, "Arise, take the young child and his mother, flee into Egypt, Be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. So they had to flee. They had to leave because now Herod is looking for him. And Herod does not want to fall down and worship him. Herod is not bringing gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Right? Herod is looking at a threat to his dynasty, to his time on the throne. And remember, Herod is just he's really a puppet king. He doesn't really have much authority. We know that. They're under the rule of the Roman government. He's only there because the Roman government has allowed him to be there. And he totally answers to the Roman government. But he so wants to keep his position and his authority that any idea that someone has come along that is, quote, the king of the Jews, is a threat to him. So he's going to put out this edict to find him. Ultimately, it will cause the death of a multitude of children. But what do we see about the wise men? Starting in verse 11. They came in, they see the young child, no longer an infant, probably a toddler or something close to that. He's with Mary, his mother. They fell down and worshiped him. Again, I wanted to look at their reaction. What did they do? They weren't looking for something from him, what he could do for them. In fact, they came to worship him, and they came to bring gifts. It was an opportunity to show their reverence for who this child really was. Most didn't understand that, right? Nobody knew that. I mean, most didn't believe it, even if they had heard it, right? There were very few